But there was something more to her, something that attracted him in a way he'd not felt before. Judith Stanford had a heart for the very things he did. She cared about those around her who were suffering and in need, and she put others first.
Welcome to Read Minnesota Books. I'm your host, Deborah Copperrood. Let's time travel a little bit. When I was a kid, I grew up across the street from my town's public library. Lucky, right? I would go there all the time, and there was a probably 2 year period where the main thing I read were these slim historical romance pulp fiction books. They were on one of those circular metal rotating racks. I can still hear the squeak of those metal fixtures when I think about turning the rack to pick out my next good read. And I swear I learned more about US history from those books than I did from my actual history classes in junior high school. Because history textbooks and lectures can be dry depending on who's teaching, especially if the class is focused on dates and rote memorization. And these little novels I loved, they were immersive, they were detailed, they were so enjoyable to read. I was sad when I realized that I had reached the end of them and I had to move on to a different section of the library to find something fresh. I was reminded of how I felt as a young reader allowed to check out books in the adult section for the first time and discovering the joy of historical fiction when I read Faithful of Heart by today's guest, Tracie Peterson. Faithful of Heart is the first in her new series that takes place in Minnesota, published by Bethany House, a division of Baker Publishing Group. Faithful of Heart is a historical Christian romance set in 1870s Minneapolis about the courtship between Judith Stanford, a philanthropist, and Roman Turner, a physician, and the financial history between their two families. Tracie Peterson is a powerhouse of an author. She's published over 100 novels that have sold nearly 6 million copies. She's won the American Christian Romance Writers Lifetime Achievement Award and the Romantic Times Career Achievement Award. Tracie, welcome to Read Minnesota Books.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So tell me, what is your connection to Minnesota?
The first and most obvious is that Bethany House Publishers are right there in Minneapolis. So it was like I would come and see them, and then I would go and venture out and look at the various historical sites
Mm.
and go to the museums and whatnot, and realized, there was a lot of really interesting history for the area.
Can you tell me about your latest project, Faithful of Heart?
I'd love to. Uh, as I said, as I would go out and look at the various museums and whatnot, I realized that Minneapolis in particular was a town that had long given itself to charitable causes and helps for the underprivileged. And so I thought this was really interesting, the fact that their very first hospital was a charity hospital, and there was a woman in the 1870s who had promoted and built a home for unwed mothers and prostitutes of all these different things. I just loved the heart of the people. And so I started putting together ideas, and I thought I would really like to do a series that would show the heart of Minneapolis and this charity desire, to serve others, because as a Christian, I feel that we should be there for one another in that way and help be the hands and feet of God. And so I decided a generational series would be something that might be fun. And so I thought this first book will have Judith, and she is a dynamic young woman who has a lot on the ball. She's intelligent, she's compassionate, and she wants to do good to help others. And so she starts out with her little works that she does, and little by little things build. She has a grandfather in Minneapolis who wants her to come and see him because he's trying to decide if she's worthy of inheriting his millions. And she doesn't even know him. They've long been estranged. And so it created a complication right from the get-go. And then there's Dr. Roman Turner, as you mentioned earlier, and he has a history with Judith's grandfather. The man was the ruin of his family. And so when he finds this out, there's a clash right from the beginning. And so book one will deal with their adventures in learning to forget the past and forgive the past, as well as their hearts are joined in this desire to help others. And so that takes place in book one. Then there's two more books in the series, and they both come out this year. And the second book will deal with their daughter, and the third with their granddaughter.
Oh, wonderful. I saw the second book on the website, but I didn't know about the
Yes,
third.
you can
That's,
pre-order it, and the third one will come out in November.
oh, wonderful. And so what drew you to to begin in the 1870s?
There was so much going on in Minneapolis. There was a pastor, the Reverend David Knickerbacker, and he wanted to create this charity hospital. And as I said, it's the very first hospital in Minneapolis. And so he is working hard with various people in the community to raise funds to create this hospital. And so I thought, well, great, I'll have my doctor hero be a part of that and come in on the side. That'll be perfect for that. At the same time, there's an amazing woman in Minneapolis's history named Charlotte Van Cleve, and she was a dynamo. She was the first white child born in Wisconsin territory, and then married an army man and came to the Minneapolis area. And she had a heart and passion for women who had gotten themselves into trouble, gotten pregnant, or were finding themselves in situations of prostitution or feeling compelled to, have to do things that were, not society approved, that kind of thing. And so
Hmm.
she created an unwed mother's home, but not just to throw them in there and have babies and send them on their way, and not to take their children against their will or anything like that. She created a place that they would sign on for a year and come and learn skills that could take them into the working world and help them if they wanted to keep their children and whatnot. And so she was just this amazing woman. She was the first woman to be on the Board of Education there in Minnesota. And so all these different things, you had this amazing history in 1870 of these people coming together to create this very progressive thinking, charitable heart in the city.
Yeah, that is so interesting. I loved the period details in the book. One of the first chapters, we see Judith on her grandfather's private train car. We learn about her clothes. You describe the Minneapolis homes, like down to the blonde colored bricks that are made in Chaska, Minnesota. I don't love scarlet fever, but the disease
Oh,
added a lot of
absolutely.
drama to the plot. Can you tell me about the research for your books? Like, what sources are you using? How are you
Absolutely.
going about this?
You know, ever since I started writing, historicals were the books that I love to write the most because that's what I love to read the most. And I love to read history. My husband's a historian, and he used to help me full time with the history. And
Oh.
then I allowed him to retire. But, the research is my favorite part of the writing uh, I love it. I love to go and visit the places that I write about. I love to talk to the local historians. A lot of times you'll get stories out of them and ideas and research materials that you can't get anywhere else. And so coming to local areas, looking at diaries, looking at journals, the things that really give it that flavor for the time period were some of the things that I like to use. And so, as I said, my publisher's there in Minneapolis, and so coming there was no chore. And digging in and researching the various areas. I think I was trying to remember. It seems like Charlotte's house is a historical site that maybe you can tour to this day. I can't remember. But there were different things like that, and getting a lay of the land and a feel for things, even though so much has changed. Obviously, a huge city has built up around the area and whatnot. But there's a feel, and going out to the lakes and different things like that. You just get kind of attitude and atmosphere that you can sometimes draw into the story. And so I'm well known for my historical accuracy, but that doesn't mean I won't make mistakes. And so if there are mistakes, I'm sure to hear about it, but I try really hard to be accurate because the details are important. As you mentioned earlier, I get a lot of little girls who read my books. And their mothers in homeschool will use them to interest them in the historical time period. I've had teachers say that, that they like to use my books. And so I try to be as accurate as possible because I love the details. And I think the history is so valuable and so important and something to really, in this case, be very proud of.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have, besides Minneapolis, do you have a favorite place that you've traveled to for research?
Oh, absolutely. I love Alaska. I love my home state of Montana. So much of what I write is out in the wilderness or out in the wilds or whatever. Occasionally I write about a city like Minneapolis, but Alaska just is so amazing because so much of it is still very much unchanged. And there, it's a very neat place to go to and just kind of lose yourself and imagine what it was like for people coming there for the first time in this rugged wilderness so far removed from everything.
Right. So Judith Stanford, the protagonist, is an exemplary example of a Christian woman. She's principled, she's generous, kind, and I feel like your focus on the progressive and charitable nature of the city is very prescient. Here, like right now in 2026, if Judith were living in 2026 during the federal occupation of Minneapolis, where do you imagine her fitting in? Do you think she would have been a protester? Would she be delivering groceries to people hiding at home? Would she have been setting up a GoFundMe campaign for rent relief?
Well, Judith is a very hands-on person, so I tend to think she would be working behind the scenes to get food, blankets, clothes, that kind of thing to those in need. I think she would be doing whatever she could to influence the people around her in a positive and calm manner that human beings are human beings and they have the same needs, each and every one of us. We need food, we need good air to breathe, we need water. You know, these are very basic staples of life. And I think Judith would have been very, very much one of those people that would have been there to lend a hand. I don't think she would have worried about, the politics of the things. I think she just would have seen people and wanted to be hands and feet of Christ.
Sure. Let's see. I was going to ask you about your favorite part of the writing process, but you already answered that. The research
No
is
problem.
the your favorite. But when you get down to the writing of the books, do you like to generate or do you like to revise?
Oh, definitely generate. I often tell people I'm a storyteller. The technique is not my strong suit. I very much value my editorial team, and I'm so glad that they're there. I do my best, as far as making sure the I's are dotted and the T's crossed and the commas in the right place. But they are very, very valuable to me because as a storyteller, that's my focus. I want to create characters and setting, and I want to take you on a journey. And I don't want you to lose interest in that journey anywhere along the way. So I want to keep it moving forward constantly. And that's my goal is to keep you turning those pages until that book is concluded. And so when I hear from readers saying, oh, I couldn't put this down, or my aunt will give me a call and say, you know, I made sure everybody knew there was not going to be clean clothes or hot meals cooked until I finished this book. I love that. And so when I hear from people and their heart is that, the pacing of the book was just so that they just couldn't stop. They had to keep going. I love that. That makes me know I've done my job. So generating that story is my favorite part.
Got it. And you're so prolific. Can I ask you, like, how many do you track like how many words you type a day or like how many hours you're at it a day?
Sure. All through my career, I've written like 3 to 5 books a year.
Hmm.
And I do that with a very detailed synopsis. So first of all, I'm a plotter.
Got
And
it.
as a plotter, I outline my story. And I joke about this with seat of the pants writers that, we're really doing the same thing. I'm just writing a very abbreviated version of the book. My synopses, though, might be 20 pages long or even longer. I like to write a detailed chapter by chapter synopsis, so I'm plotting out the story as I go, just like they do. I'm just making a very abbreviated version. But, for me, in that planning, I can accomplish so much more. And so once my synopsis is in place, I challenge myself to write at least a chapter a day. And if I'm on deadline, maybe more. And those chapters vary anywhere from, 3 to 5,000 words, maybe, or whatever. I don't try to limit myself. If I feel like writing, several chapters, I do. If I don't feel like writing at all, but rather feel I need more research, I stop and do that. But every day I get up and I go over what I wrote the day before and I read that synopsis and I can flow right into the next chapter then. And that gives me a sense of not breaking with what has already taken place so that the scenes are very transitional, smoothly done and, when I end one chapter, you have that push, that need to go on. And so
Sure.
that's kind of my routine and the outline. I am going to be slowing down and doing less just simply because I'm getting older and that's what needs to happen for me, my health and everything in between. But, it's something I have a great passion for. Writing for me has always been a ministry. And my desire is to share the gospel of Jesus and offer biblical application for people and to be encouraging. I want the books to entertain you. I joke about my 3 E's. I want them to entertain you. I want to educate. And so I want the history to be very accurate and so forth. But I also want them to encourage. When you finish that book, I want you to close that and feel encouraged. I want you to feel uplifted. I want to give you that happily ever after ending.
Yeah, definitely. Who is your favorite Minnesota writer?
I saw that that was going to be a question you would ask. And I thought, that's funny. I'd never thought in particular of the area, but I'm a fan of Julie Clausen and I'm a fan of Gabrielle Meyer. And so both of those ladies write historical and they write Christian. And so they're very much favorites of mine.
Great. I don't know those authors. Are they also Bethany House
Yes, they
writers?
are. Yes.
Okay,
And Julie's right there in the St. Paul area. And I can't remember where Gabrielle is, but yes.
great. And are you on social media? Where can folks follow you online and find out about
I
all of your
am,
books?
it's kind of funny. The publisher they were the ones to promote that and push me in that direction because I really don't have a lot of time for it, writing 3 to 5 books a year and
Right.
researching them out. And so yes, you can find me at Facebook and it's facebook.com/author Tracie Peterson, or I think you can get there through Tracie Peterson author. Uh, I have a website, and that's just www.traciepeterson.com. And I'm also on Instagram, and that's author Tracie Peterson.
Great. Thank you. I will link to those profiles in the show notes of this episode.
Okay.
Well, Tracie, thank you so much for joining me today on Read Minnesota Books. I've really enjoyed learning about your research and your writing process and your book, Faithful of Heart.
Thanks for having me. And I love that you're doing a focus on your state there and the books that are written by the authors from the state and about the state. I think that's great.
Yeah, thank you. Before we go, it's recommendation time. Since we're on the theme of history today, I'm going to recommend checking out your County Historical Society. Where I grew up across the street from the public library, The County Historical Society was also housed in that same building, and it was this small little museum of local artifacts. I just looked at their website, and they have so much online now. A county history timeline, digital photos, links to the Library of Congress database that includes digitized articles from the local newspaper in the late 1800s, stuff like cemetery records, even. I feel like if you are a writer and you're looking for inspiration, your county historical society might just give you some good ideas to use as a writing prompt or a subject to research. Take a look. And that concludes this episode of Read Minnesota Books. Thanks for listening. Stay safe. Goodbye, friends.